At a young age, Abel receives a zero magic verdict. Coming from a family of powerful mages, this is worse than a death sentence. He'd always thought he'd become a mage just like his younger sister, who manifested insane magical abilities at his age. But his world shatters when he learns he has zero magic power. The real pain comes one night when the entire town is attacked by a mysterious demon known as a heretic. Everyone runs helter-skelter as a black sludge swallows unfortunate victims. Abel and his sister, Frosel, find themselves caught in the mayhem and try to escape. These heretics are former humans who turn against the gods to worship false gods and become demons. On that horrible night, Abel tries to play the big bro and protect his little sister from the monsters. But as they run for their lives, they come face to face with a lone figure standing over heaps of bodies. Abel freezes in fear at the sight. This monster isn't only a heretic, but a false god. Out of nowhere, the false god unleashes devastating flaming blasts down the street, aiming straight at Abel. But in a split second, Frosel steps forward to protect her brother by summoning an earth wall to block the incoming fire. But everything changes for Abel that night when his little sister gets burned by the flames and collapses. Panicking, the protagonist drops to the ground, clutches her, and begs her to stay awake. He notices she's still breathing, but then he sees something extraordinary. A strange, coiled magical symbol appears on her back. It's the mark of the false god, a curse that promises a short life and relentless doom. There are two paths against this curse. The first is to find the legendary elixir once used by the greatest archmage, but finding it is as impossible as finding a baddie with a body count of 2. The second is the Philosopher's Stone, also crafted by the greatest archmage, and with fiery determination, Abel swears to master magic and forge this Philosopher's Stone with his bare hands. Zero magic or not, he declares he will save his sister from this horrible curse. Time goes by in a flash, but even though Frosel is fine now, and the evil false god mark on her body has long disappeared, the curse remains unbroken, and Abel is the only one aware of this. If he fails to create the Philosopher's Stone, his sister will eventually die in her 30s. That's why Abel dedicated his entire life, burying himself in the research needed to craft this Philosopher's Stone. For years, he shut himself in, skipping school and studied non-stop despite his zero mana handicap. Fed up with his nerdy attitude, his father loses it one morning, kicks him out of the house and disowns him. With no place to go, Abel stays in a crappy hotel in the meantime while he figures out what to do. He suddenly remembers the old library he used to visit when he was younger and rushes there. Getting to the library, the old librarian greets him and then shows him the latest addition to the library. A grimoire written in ancient script that countless mages visiting have been unable to read. But since Abel has been studying all his life, he is also knowledgeable in ancient texts. So he starts reading this mysterious book with growing excitement and discovers something he had never heard before. The book talks about the principles of science, which immediately catches his interest. So he asks the old librarian for permission to borrow the book. After hours of reading this strange science book, Abel decides to test the theories. Before anything, he sketches the apparatus from its diagrams, then tries to create water by heating mercury to form mercury oxide. After several failed attempts, Abel is shocked to finally see a drop of water form inside the test tube. He gasps in disbelief, realizing the experiment is just as described in the principles of science. Suddenly, everything makes sense to him now. Abel now understands that the ancient wisdom completely contradicts modern magic, and science provides explanations that make magic seem primitive. But he still has questions which can only be decided by doing more experiments. Sometime later that day, Abel continues his experiments, trying to construct spells using strict scientific theory. Based on his studies, he recalls there is a way to use magic even with zero mana. But since mana comes from the soul, capacity decides everything. Magicians have been known to convert their souls into mana and then consume that mana to cast magic. At the same time, the soul is vital for life itself, and too much depletion drops life below the safe line. For someone without any mana like Abel, his soul sits right on the edge, and using it could be fatal. Still, he has come too far to quit and decides to take the risk, knowing he might die. Abel breathes deeply and starts converting his soul into mana. As the process intensifies, he screams in agonizing pain but refuses to stop. Suddenly, a glow of mana shivers along his fingers like static. The experiment takes its toll on Abel as he starts bleeding from his eyes. Still, he wipes off the blood and steadies his hand to touch the magic circle. Suddenly, a spark of ignition nearly forms on the circle, but it flickers out mid-cast. Abel blinks, surprised, but then he remembers something that can help. So he quickly runs to his drawer and brings out a small shard filled with magic stones. He takes out one of the magic stones, grips it tightly, and starts the mana conversion process all over again. But this time, the magic is completely under his control. The flames burn with scientific precision as the room erupts in a massive spark of ignition. The following week, Abel turns his hotel room into a lab as he continues to study the science of magic. At twilight, he rushes to a nearby store to get more magic stones for his experiment. These stones hold faint traces of magical energy and are mostly used to power lamps and streetlights, but they have been very useful for Abel's science-based magic. After several trials and experiments, Abel has perfected the art of conjuring liquid fire through functional magic, using zero traditional mana and pure scientific principles. He remembers all the harsh insults he has endured for years from everyone, including his father, who always calls him a failure for having no magical ability. But now, through science, Abel has successfully activated his mana. He looks at his hands and exhales, realizing all the hard work has finally paid off and he finally holds magic for real. 2 months pass in a flash, and while walking down the street, Abel realizes he has exhausted the little funds his dad gave him. Even worse, he has been so engrossed in work and research that he hasn't been eating. Suddenly, everything starts to dim like a curtain dropping, and Abel faints from hunger. Fortunately, the old librarian sees him lying on the road, unconscious, and takes him back to the library to feed him. Seeing how skinny and malnourished Abel looks, the old librarian suggests he start working at the library to at least make a little cash. However, Abel thanks the old geezer for his generosity, insisting he still has some work to do. Even though the old man isn't too pleased with his decision, he suggests that since Abel loves reading spellbooks, he can support his gifted sister at the Magical Academy through deeper spellbook knowledge. Abel immediately gets excited. He grabs the old man by the collar and thanks him for the idea. The next day, Abel arrives at the magnificent Magic Academy. He slips through the crowd of students there for the entrance exam and heads to the registration desk. After writing down his name, he is surprised to hear his mana has to be measured and is instructed to place his hand on an artifact. Nervously, Abel does just that, and the registrar is shocked to see he has 0 mana. Just then, one black-haired girl steps forward after reading his mana level from afar and starts to mock him, saying the academy isn't a place for rejects who can't use magic. But Abel refuses to be mocked and shuts her down. After registration, the instructor announces the entrance exam will be in battle format, ending only when the examinee gives up or when the ref decides a combatant is unable to continue. With that, the students finally enters the magnificent circular coliseum, ready to commence the throwdown. The entrance exam begins with Abel facing a blonde douche face named Kent. As the protagonist walks out, lab coat swinging, the crowd whispers that he never even set foot in a junior school before this. Upon hearing this, Kent grins and mocks Abel, calling him a useless dropout. But Abel remains calm despite his taunts. Still, the smug face keeps taunting Abel before cockily calling the fight a free win. The second the examiner announces the start of the match, the protagonist grabs his magic stone and whips up a glowing circle, locked and loaded with airflow manipulation. Before Kent can even process what's happening, Abel fires off a wind attack, but it's nothing more than a light breeze that just flutters Kent's cloak and gives his hair a tiny lift. As a result, Kent laughs at the pathetic attack and then prepares to counterattack. But then something incredible happens. Kent's chest tightens and he suddenly can't breathe. He clutches his throat and stumbles to the floor while Abel calmly declares the duel over. The examiner, seeing Kent laid out cold on the floor, freezes in shock and then officially declares Abel the winner of the first round. The stunned spectators immediately erupts in confused whispers and restless glances as the academy medics rush the fallen candidate to the infirmary. Meanwhile, Abel slips out of the arena without a word, leaving the students staring at him, wondering who the heck this mystery guy is. On getting outside of the arena, Abel is relieved that his plan had worked better than expected, and his magic works just fine in combat. While fighting with Kent, he didn't just use wind magic. He had manipulated the air to isolate nitrogen, quietly cutting off the oxygen and making it impossible for Kent to breathe. Abel wishes he could just use this airflow manipulation and coast through every match in the entrance exam, but he knows it might not work on everybody. Coincidentally, elsewhere in the arena, Frosel, his sister, is engaged in her own entrance exam, and she is wrecking her opponent. After her flawless victory, her examiner congratulates her. But then he warns her about some crazy examinee who keeps advancing and advises her to keep her guard up because she might end up facing this person. But what really shocks her is when the loudmouth examiner spills a rumor that this crazy examinee has zero magic. Connecting the dots, Frosel instantly clocks that this maniac's probably her nutcase brother. Meanwhile, in another part of the arena, Abel easily defeats his round 2 opponent using the same choking technique. After that, he moves on to round 3 and wins without breaking a sweat. But just then, the crowd of students, realizing he has used the exact same trick 3 times in a row, starts whispering about his mysterious technique and wonders if it's really just basic magic. They also gossip about Abel's 0 mana and insist there's no way someone with 0 mana can advance this far. But for the 4th round, Abel faces his most dangerous opponent yet, and it's none other than the sharp-tongued girl named Edish who had earlier called him out at registration. Before the duel commences, Edish warns him not to get cocky and confidently says his cheap tricks won't work on her. However, the second the announcer kicks off the match, Abel wastes no time, blasting out an airflow manipulation attack right from the jump. But Edish claps back instantly with a wind wall, snuffing out his move, and then tells him his so-called air poison will never touch her. Wasting no time, Abel immediately follows up with a quick ice spear, but Edish laughs at his textbook-level magic and then plays it by the book by readying a fireball to melt his spear. But unexpectedly, Abel's ice spear turns into a steam pressure bomb that explodes, rocking the entire arena and blowing Edish off her feet. Edish, lying on the ground and hurt, can't wrap her head around how Abel's ice spear just exploded, since there's not even a fire element in it. But Abel just smiles, knowing it can only be explained through science. Edish tries to stand, but Abel advises her to just surrender. But Edish refuses to back down, swearing she'll never forgive him and vowing to crush him into dust. Suddenly, the black-haired girl begins a spirit summoning and calls a phoenix, an immortal flame avatar that heals damage as fast as it's dealt, leaving the crowd and even Frosel stunned. Edish, consumed by the phoenix's fearsome wind and fire, confidently admits she didn't expect to use demon spirits summoning on a miserable loser like Abel. Then she goes for the finisher, compressing the phoenix's power into a stadium-sized massive fireball and hurling it straight at him. But Abel doesn't flinch. He breathes and then, using his science magic knowledge, he unveils a revolutionary technique known as gravity manipulation. With this technique, he creates a powerful gravitational field that stops the massive fireball midair. As a result, the fireball fizzles out and Edish's eyes go wide in disbelief, but right then her mana tanks and she crashes to the ground, completely done for. Abel then steps forward, calmly tells her to quit fighting and then suggests she surrender. But the stubborn girl refuses to give up despite her hopeless situation. She swears she won't surrender and then desperately creates sudden gusts with air current manipulation to crack his defenses. But Abel remains completely unimpressed by her traditional approach. He debates whether to just wait for her to burn herself out, but with no choice he decides to make a crucial decision. Reluctantly, Abel summons a powerful lightning strike using advanced scientific principles and drops it on Edish like a judge's gavel. This powerful move deals the final blow and knocks her unconscious. Seeing this, the spectators in the arena start questioning the kind of magic Abel had used on Edish. But since they didn't hear him use any incantation, they immediately assume the girl must have collapsed due to exhaustion. The arena falls silent as Abel stands victorious once again. Meanwhile, Abel is relieved, knowing no one recognizes his lightning magic. He understands that successfully casting lightning magic is completely unheard of in the current era and will cause massive problems if exposed. Just then, the announcer declares that victory goes to Examine Abel once again, and Abel continues his unprecedented winning streak, marching on to his next and final match. Moving on to the next match, Abel suddenly hears a familiar voice that makes his blood run cold. He recognizes his final opponent's voice immediately, and it is none other than his younger sister, Frosel. Frosel demands to know what Abel is doing at the academy, and while Abel tries to play it cool, claiming he came to surprise her, the examiner cuts the reunion short and calls for the match to begin. Without a second thought, Frosel kicks off the duel with Giant's Fist, firing a boulder-sized knuckle straight at Abel, but Abel, still holding back, doesn't even raise a guard. Frosel is forced to make the earthen fist vanish and then asks why he isn't even trying to defend himself. Abel shrugs, saying he's not about to start throwing hands with his little sister, and besides, he sees no point in fighting since he's already passed. Frosel shoots him a daggered glare and warns that if he doesn't fight her for real, she'll start despising him right here and now. Abel immediately begs her to chill and then unleashes airflow manipulation, which cuts off the air around Frosel, making it impossible for her to breathe. Satisfied, Abel figures if Frosel can't breathe, she sure as heck can't chant a spell, and he's already calling this his checkmate. But to his amazement, Frosel slams her fist on the ground, using chantless invocation to cast spells without speaking. This technique is advanced magic only top-tier mages can pull off, and Abel cannot believe his sister can do it. Nervous, he scrambles for a counter, but that split-second pause is all Frosel needs. Her massive stone fist sends him flying across the arena, over the rail and crashing into the stands. With Abel hurt, Frosel admits the air finally feels good again and then steps forward with a confident smirk, asking Abel if he still feels like dancing. The boy laughs like he is fine, but he's aching all over and has at least 2 ribs broken. When Frosel demands to know the lung-clamping trick he uses on her, Abel replies that it's a product of his little research project and then tells her to pay up if she wants details. Naturally, this ticks Frosel off, and she threatens to beat the truth out of him with her chantless invocation. Out of nowhere, a giant rock fist comes swinging at the protagonist, and then a second one barrels in from the other side, ready to pancake him. But as both fists smash together with a loud bang, our boy pulls off his science magic swagger, gravity control, which levitates him in the air above the fists. Even though they are supposed to be rivals at the moment, Frosel is genuinely impressed by her bro's levitation skills. However, she responds by unleashing Stone Shard Volley, launching a storm of rock needles at the protagonist. But the lab coat guy summons gravity control, inverts the vectors, and sends the shards back to the sender. Frosel, surprised, immediately creates a wall of earth and tanks it. Confident that staying airborne keeps him out of Frosel's reach, Abel smirks and declares it now his turn to strike. He chants Ignite, and the whole arena erupts in a massive explosion, sending a cold shiver straight down Frosel's spine. As the arena fills with choking smoke and flying debris, the crowd stares in disbelief, stunned that one blast could spark a fire this massive. But Abel stands in the haze, knowing that based on his groundbreaking science, explosions aren't really about the fire. If molecules vibrate hard enough, the insane heat they generate will light up a blaze on its own. With all Frosel's attacks neutralized, Abel scans the smoke, wondering if his brat sisters got another trick loaded or if this match is already done. After a couple minutes with no sign of Frosel, Abel panics, wondering if he went too far with his attack. Worried, he starts shouting for her, desperate to know if she made it through his blast. But in that moment, a glowing sigil appears from within the smoke as a voice chants, "Tower of Earth." Suddenly, an enormous explosion rocks the entire arena as the earth erupts skyward like a pillar in spectacular fashion, with Frosel on top. Abel's jaw drops in shock, and Frosel shows no mercy, jamming her rock-hard forearm straight into his mouth. Abel tries to retaliate, but he realizes he cannot chant spells properly with Frosel's hand locked inside his face hole. Seeing his desperation, Frosel smirks, understanding that covering an opponent's mouth to kill their chant is basic magic combat 1-0-1, but a rookie like her brother wouldn't have a clue. She hits him with another spell, Increase Weight, cutting off his levitation and sending him plummeting like a meteor, then plants her foot on him for good measure. Abel's eyes go wide in fear as he plummets, while his sister coolly points out she might not have his finesse, but she sure as heck knows her way around gravity. As Abel crashes down, his vision fades, and within minutes, he's completely out cold. As the last moments of the fight replay in his head, Abel snaps back to consciousness, dazed and confused about where he is. He looks up to see Frosel looming over him, asking if he's finally decided to wake up. Caught off guard, Abel lets out a scream like a virgin on their first night and immediately bolts upright. But to his shock, he feels no pain, and every bruise on his body is completely healed. Seeing his confusion, Frosel explains it's because of the blessing of the Azoth sword. It turns out this sword, kept at the academy, heals injuries quickly, and thanks to this, students can engage in magic battles with relative safety. After explaining, Frosel smiles warmly, congratulates Abel on passing the entrance exam, and then fist bumps him. But just then, her expression sharpens as she asks how someone like Abel with 0 mana can suddenly use such advanced magic. Abel freezes at the question. He knows that telling her the truth will make everyone see him as a heretic, and will even put Frosel in danger since she carries the curse of the false god. So he lies and says he never had 0 mana and the mana test was wrong all along. But Frosel isn't buying his disgusting lie. She presses harder, saying what he did at the entrance exam makes him a suspect of heresy. She explains that not all heretics look like demons. Some look like humans who usually don't have any mana, so they use magic-like techniques powered by the false god. Unable to withstand the accusation, Abel grabs her by the shoulder and finally lets the cat out of the bag, saying he is a genius. He then goes into a more detailed explanation about how he builds magic that uses almost no mana, supplemented by magic stones. Frosel is surprised hearing this and finds it impossible to believe. She presses for the details on his groundbreaking discovery, but Abel says it a secret, leaving her visibly annoyed. At any rate, Frosel tells him it's fine if he wants to keep it a secret. But then she warns him never to fight the way he did at the entrance exam ever again. She advises him not to stray too far from normal magic, or he will be branded a heretic, and could draw unwanted attention from magical authorities who investigate heretical practices. Abel nods, knowing she's right and he needs to be careful. As Frosel turns to leave, Abel thanks her for worrying and goes in for a hug, only to get slammed to the ground by her massive earth fist for getting handsy sometime later outside the academy. Frosel mentions heading home until the entrance ceremony in 2 weeks and then asks Abel where he plans on staying. Abel reminds her he can't return home since he has been disowned, so Frosel suggests he stay at the dorm. Abel finds her idea perfect, since staying in the dorm means uninterrupted time to study magic. Before leaving, Frosel asks Abel if she can inform their dad of his enrollment into the Magic Academy, and Abel says he doesn't mind. 3 days later, the dorms are still empty and Abel is the only student there. The silence is almost too perfect, so he takes advantage of it to keep studying the principles of science. He is so engrossed in the study that he doesn't notice someone creeping up behind him. He freaks out when he hears a mysterious voice, and when he turns, he comes face to face with a smiling girl with cute, big eyes named Myaria. The excited girl asks if he is the only one in the dorm and then starts asking a bunch of personal questions to know more about him. However, Abel barely keeps up with her annoying questions, and when he notices they will never end, he indirectly pushes her away so he can continue studying. With that, Myaria walks away, and upon reaching a secluded part of the dorm, she starts crying. Her intention is to connect with Abel, but clearly the first meeting falls apart and the conversation ends badly. Still, she consoles herself that there will be other chances since they are at the same school after all. She finds Abel's magic at the entrance exam strange, and her mission is to find out whether he is a heretic or not. Several minutes later at the dorm, Abel, still engrossed in his reading, hears a knock on his room door. When he opens it, he receives an unexpected letter from his sister, Frosel, sealed with a familiar mark, which makes him wonder why she would bother reaching out at all. He reads the letter and is shocked to learn that Frosel has told their dad about his acceptance into the Magic Academy, and the old man wants him to return home immediately. Instantly, Abel pictures his dad going crazy with joy, yelling that he's brought glory to the family by getting into the academy. In that imagined moment, his dad clutches his shoulders, tearfully admitting he was wrong to disown him, and then asks for forgiveness. But back in reality, Abel's eyes drop to the small PS at the bottom, where Frosel warns him that the dad is actually furious and advises him to be careful. Days later at the library, the old librarian is over the moon hearing that Abel had passed the exams. The old man admits he seriously didn't think Abel would get into the prestigious Magic Academy, and he's genuinely happy that Abel can continue being a nerd. After leaving the old librarian, Abel heads home to see his dad, but he's still worried over why the old man's mad at him. As he debates turning back to the dorm, his ugly dad suddenly appears from nowhere and with a stern voice calls his name. Before Abel can even speak, his father drags him into the study like he's taking out the trash. In the study, Abel's father sits with crossed arms, clearly furious, and asks if Abel knows why he's mad. The protagonist cheerfully admits he doesn't have a clue and then jokes, asking if the father is angry because he is jobless. Upon hearing this, the veins in the father's head nearly pop from fury. He screams and then reveals he's furious because he feels Abel must have cheated somehow in the entrance exam, which he finds absolutely disgraceful. Abel disagrees, insisting he had earned his place fair and square. But the brick-faced father doesn't buy it. He grabs Abel and yells, insisting he spill what he did to pass. Still, the protagonist protests that he really can use magic now, but the dad furiously bangs the table and asks him to prove it by summoning a fireball. Abel's stunned that, out of every magic trick out there, the grumpy man chooses a fireball as the test. However, his magic doesn't work like that. It's based on science, not pure elements. So Abel comes clean to his dad, telling him he can't even pull off a fireball. Angered by his words, his father roars that if Abel can't handle a baby spell like a fireball, then there's no way he got into the academy without cheating. Suddenly, Abel decides to shut him up his way by manipulating gravity to lift his doubting father straight into the air. The dad watches in complete shock as Abel demonstrates his incredible scientific magic right before his eyes. Abel stays calm and continues to keep his old man afloat, certain this display will finally shut down any doubts. But still, his father refuses to believe it and says Abel must be getting support from his younger sister. Since the old man is proving more stubborn than a popping strip chat adds, Abel cranks the intensity, sending his father wobbling through the air like a rag doll. Finally, the man's defiance cracks and he nervously stammers Abel's name. Meanwhile, Abel stays cool and asks if his dad's ready to admit he can use magic now. The dad touches the floor, looking shaken. For a moment, it seems he's about to apologize until his wig falls off. Abel picks up the wig, glances at his father, and suddenly realizes the old man looks like the loved child of a chimp and a troll, scaring the heck out of him. Suddenly, Abel's father breaks down. He apologizes profusely, admitting he's been sorry for so long about how he treated his son. He recalls Abel's childhood obsession with magic, and how, even as a little boy, he devours advanced grimoires with ease. In a family of mages, it seems certain Abel will shine, until the cruel truth comes out and it's revealed he has no mana at all. That reality crushes his father, who admits he has cursed fate for years. However, he now realizes Abel has overcome his cruel destiny and has fought the impossible. The father admits he had been wrong and then bows his head, asking for Abel's forgiveness. Abel, surprised, says he isn't mad. For the first time in years, his father smiles, a genuine, unguarded smile Abel can barely remember seeing. But just then, the conversation shifts back to the old man asking Abel how he's able to use magic. Internally, Abel debates whether his father will actually be cooperative if he tells the truth, or will immediately condemn him as a heretic. In the end, Abel chooses a half-truth, telling his dad that his mana isn't zero after all, and that he has developed a theory that lets him cast with very little. Abel watches carefully, wondering if his dad will buy his cappings, but upon hearing this, his father's eyes light up with pride, and he declares Abel a genius all along. Several minutes later, Abel steps out of the tense conversation with his father, letting out a quiet sigh of relief that the old man actually bought the lie. Suddenly, he bumps into Frosel at the entrance of the house, arms crossed and eyes locked on him. Abel immediately teases her about being worried for her big brother, but she shoots him down instantly, and then mentions she waited because she has something important to tell him. With no emotions, Frosel firmly warns Abel not to talk to her at school. The ungrateful brat adds that on campus, they're just two strangers who happen to share a last name. When Abel asks why she would even want to hide that they're siblings, Frosel doesn't mince words. She says it's because he's bound to cause trouble, and as the academy's top student, she can't afford to get dragged into his mess. Abel protests, calling it unfair, but she's already leaving, telling him that's how it's gonna be, and then warns him not to do anything reckless with his magic. Still confused about the situation, Abel shouts for her to wait, but the spoiled girl runs off, muttering under her breath about how stupid her brother is. Finally, the day of the much-anticipated entrance ceremony arrives. Students gather in the grand hall, buzzing with energy, as the headmaster, Alex, steps onto the stage. His voice carries through the hall as he congratulates them for passing the academy's brutal entrance exams, and he advises that, from here on out, they should push themselves harder and compete to become top-tier mages. Abel stands among the crowd of new students as the headmaster welcomes them to the Magic Academy. As the welcome speech drags on, Abel slouches in his chair, thinking it's pure torture, especially when it has nothing to do with magic. Finally, the ceremony concludes with a speech from a beautiful blonde girl named Judith, who takes the stage as the student council president, and then congratulates all the new students on their enrollment into the academy. After the ceremony, students check the class placement lists posted on the bulletin boards. Abel searches for his name and discovers he's placed in Class D while his sister is assigned to Class A. As Abel turns to leave, a sharp voice calls out for him to wait up. He barely turns before Edish tackles him to the ground in a position perfect for stimulation. Realizing how awkward the moment is, Edish turns red with embarrassment and quickly jolts off Abel's body. She accuses him of ruining her class placement, claiming she belongs in Class A but somehow ends up in Class C because of him. Abel tries to process what the heck is going on, since he can't recognize who the hopeless romantic is or if they've even met before. But his nonchalant reaction pisses off Edish even more. She starts ranting about rankings and prestige, but our boy completely ignores her because his only goal is the Philosopher's Stone, not being a meat provider to any crazy girl. Edish becomes increasingly agitated by his silent treatment and hated the fact that the guy who wiped the floor with her at the entrance exam is even in Class D, so she yells and demands a rematch. But her loud fuss draws the attention of other students, who start clowning them as lovers for quarreling on day one. The situation becomes embarrassing, so Abel immediately runs away from the scene, leaving Edish fuming. Not long after, while in class and trying to have a peaceful moment to read, Abel encounters another girl problem. This time it's Myria who approaches him, saying it's been a while, then excitedly tells him they're in the same class. Abel can't tell who she is at first, so Myria, almost in tears, has to remind the dude of all the times they spent the other day talking about random stuff. Abel finally remembers her and apologizes, making Myria smile. She says she's happy and then eagerly suggests they get along. But suddenly, the teacher walks into the class, introduces herself as Selene, and says she's the teacher in charge of Class D. As she starts outlining their schedule for the day, Abel is lost in his science book until Myria has to snap him out of it and then inform him that everyone in class has left them behind. Embarrassed, Abel admits he would have been left behind if not for her, and together they step out of the class to meet up with the other students. Soon after, the students are led to see the Academy's sacred relic, the Azoth sword, encased in a glowing display and radiating an overwhelming aura. Before anything, Selene warns that this might be the first and last time the students see the sword and encourages them to take advantage of the opportunity. She then goes into a full lecture about how the sword is a blessing to the school and how its presence reduces the risk of fatal injuries. In other words, as long as they're at the Magic Academy, it's pretty hard to actually die. Meanwhile, Abel is captivated. The Azoth sword is the only reason he chooses to come to the Academy and the only known clue to creating the Philosopher's Stone. The hilt of the Azoth sword once held the Philosopher's Stone before it went missing, and the fact that the sword still retained the stone's blessing is strong evidence that the stone truly exists. Abel desires to study this magical sword since it will take him much closer to creating the Philosopher's Stone. But then he faces a major obstacle. Just from what he can sense, there are 3 layers of traps protecting it, and probably several more hidden defenses that are hard to detect. Despite the seemingly impossible security, Abel silently vows he'll obtain the sword someday, believing there's no point in enrolling in the academy if he can't. Shortly afterwards, the orientation ends, and before leaving, Selene informs the students about forming teams for the upcoming lessons. Abel, lost again with reading, barely hears a single instruction until Myria approaches him, asking what he plans on doing. Startled by her question, Abel asks what she means, and Myria explains that the teacher had asked everyone to form a team of 4 for some kind of contest. While she speaks, Abel notices some bunch of students gathering around a list of mana levels posted for team selection, and can't believe they actually made that public. While staring at the list, Myria shyly returns with a hesitant request. She admits she doesn't have much mana, but asks if he would maybe team up with her. Abel politely declines, saying she would be better off teaming with someone else, but she misunderstands, thinking he doesn't want to team up with her because of her trash mana level. Suddenly, someone spots Abel's name and his 0 mana level on the list, and everyone around starts mocking Abel's 0 mana level. They wonder why a horrendous loser like him is even at the academy and question whether he even passed the exam. Most of the students loudly claim they never want to team up with such a loser. Meanwhile, Myria overhears the cruel gossip and realizes her mana level of 28 isn't even the lowest as she had initially thought. Abel, reading the room, figures there's no point in staying since no one will probably team up with him. So he tells Myria not to worry and hurries back to the library to continue his research. Myria tries to stop him from going, but Abel is already heading for the door. But then the student council president, Judith, strolls into class, calls out Abel's name loud enough for the whole room to hear, and asks if he's really at the academy. The place goes dead silent, and Abel freezes mid-step, bag still in hand. When nobody answers, Judith calls Abel's name again and says she's inviting him to join them. The class looks confused until one wannabe know-it-all explains that every year on the first day, top-tier newbies get invited for the student council. Hearing that, the whole class erupts, students freaking out, asking if someone can really just waltz into the student council like that, especially Abel, the nerdy loser of all people. But in the midst of the drama, the protagonist sees the perfect chance to escape, only for Judith to catch him in the act. Abel desperately bolts down the hallway, praying the president won't bother chasing him since he's got 0 interest in the student council drama. Besides, he'd rather spend his time researching than wasting it away. But to his surprise, the crazy president girl catches up to him, grabs him by the arm, and formally invites him to the student council exchange meeting. Abel protests that he's not outstanding and has no interest in the student council. However, Judith counters that she's personally much more interested in him than in any council duties. She explains that his performance in the entrance exam is fascinating, especially when a breeze blows and his opponent suddenly collapses, and she wonders what kind of magic that is. Abel shrugs it off, saying it's a secret, and adds there's nothing worth bragging about anyway since he still got beating like a thief. Judith replies that it's to be expected since his opponent in the final is Frosel after all. Curious, Judith then asks if they're related since they share the same last name, but Abel immediately denies it. Speaking of Frosel, Judith flips into full fangirl mode, gushing about how much she admires her, calling her a combat genius she's watched fight countless times and had always being in awe. Abel then suggests they invite his impeccable sister then instead of him, but Judith tells him not to worry, saying the vice president is already on it. With a cheeky smile, Judith turns and emphasizes her interest in Abel, but Abel stands his ground, saying he is not interested in joining her moronic student council. Still, the girl refuses to take no for an answer and instead rethinks her offer. This time, she asks if Abel would rather attend her workshop instead, presenting it as an alternative to the student council meeting. That unexpected offer grabs Abel's attention instantly. Dude's about to lose his mind. He realizes the implications of this offer, knowing that seeing her workshop basically exposes everything about her magical research. And since Judith is the student council president, Abel presumes she must be incredibly skilled. So Abel rethinks it, and with a greedy glint in his eye, tells Judith he's absolutely down to check out her workshop. As they stroll through the academy halls heading to Judith's workshop, Judith reveals her deeper motivations about magical theory. She talks about the soul and how it can be channeled into magic. But of course, Abel already knows this theory since he once tried turning his soul into mana and nearly got an open invitation to Heaven's Gate. A few minutes later, they pull up to a door labeled Student Council Room, and Abel hesitates, already suspicious. But Judith swears her personal workshop is tucked right inside. As soon as they walk in, some ugly bozo with a tragic haircut almost explodes when he hears Judith's plan to show Abel her workshop. He immediately protests, jealous that he has never even seen it himself, but Judith ignores the fool like a YouTube ad on a Skull manga video and then leads Abel into her inner chamber. As she opens the door to her sanctuary, the curtains part, revealing a dim room sealed in shadows. Judith tells Abel she's all about summoning magic, and then warns him that what he's about to see might just blow his mind. Suddenly, a mysterious voice welcomes Abel, and from the darkness, countless moths burst into the air with wings shimmering under the faint light. Abel watches in disbelief as the adorable creatures swirl around Judith, making her look like a mystical goddess. But Abel can't help wondering why Judith has chosen moths as her summoned creatures, since most magicians choose intelligent animals like cats or birds for familiars. Judith notices his displeasure about her choice and then explains that, for her work, simpler souls like insects are better and easier to use than animals, and these moths have a purpose tied to her research. Her explanation surprises Abel. He's never heard of anything like this before, and it's more like an eye-opener. Judith, seeing his interest, reminds him that, just like she said before, her research is all about converting the soul into magic power. At that moment, Abel finally realizes the genius girl isn't talking about converting her own soul, but converting an insect's soul into magic power. Abel finds Judith's theory incredible and wishes he could do something like that too, but that can only happen if he has some kind of summoning magic. However, Judith acknowledges the major flaw in her research. In theory, she says it should generate an immense amount of magic power, but in practice, it produces only the tiniest fraction of that potential. As it stands, the technique is practically useless for real applications. On hearing this, Abel quietly recalls his own experience with soul consumption and how it also produces far less magic power than expected. Suddenly, he spots Judith's research notes on the desk and moves to take a look, but Judith stops him midway and offers a trade. She says if Abel shares the details of his own magic, she'll let him see more of her work. Startled, Abel panics, unsure what to say, so Judith yanks her notes back and says they are off-limits. Then she smiles and suggests they head out for lunch together. Sometime later in the exchange hall, Judith introduces herself to the new council students as the president, while the dude with the stupid haircut from earlier also introduces himself as Galb, the vice president. Meanwhile, while other students chatter away, our boy hangs back, quietly munching his food and secretly planning his escape now that he's seen Judith's workshop. When he notices Judith busy chatting with the others, Abel takes it as his cue to escape. But before he can vanish, another student approaches with a friendly grin. He introduces himself as Pablo, also a new student, shakes Abel's hand, and says they are both council officer candidates. Abel freezes in surprise and immediately clarifies that he never wanted to join the student council. Confused, Pablo asks why he's there then, to which Abel freaks out a little and then says he thought it was just a casual meet and greet. Pablo pauses for a moment to think and then asks if Abel is in Class A, to which Abel explains he's actually in Class D. Hearing that Abel is from the lowest class, Pablo is both disgusted and shocked. But just then, the tense moment is interrupted by Judith, who strolls over to greet the boys, flashing her usual serene smile and asking Abel if he's enjoying himself. Abel gives a reluctant yes, though his eyes clearly scream he'd rather leave. Following this, Pablo greets Judith formally, introducing himself as a class student. But his tone sharpens as he points out that the meeting is supposed to be for top first years chosen as student council officer candidates, so he wonders why a Class D student like Abel should be present. Judith chuckles and smoothly answers that Abel is one of those candidates, too. The vice president, Galb, overhears their conversation and nearly explodes with fury at the idea. He points out that inviting a Class D student to the meeting is bad enough, but making him an officer is unthinkable. Still, Judith stands her ground, saying she'd personally love Abel to join, but the decision is up to him. Galb, filled with jealousy, then turns to Abel and asks directly if it's true he has zero magic power. This question makes everyone in the room react with mocking disbelief, hearing that someone indeed has zero magical power. But Abel stays cool and lies, saying that's not exactly true. He says he had always had a little magic, and during the test he was sick, which tanked the reading even more. In his head, Abel is hoping he just talked his way out of it and decides to ride this lie till the wheels fall off. But then Galb presses Abel for his magic level, and when Abel says it's around 20, give or take, Galb turns to the president and flat out objects to letting someone that weak anywhere near the student council. Pablo quickly capitalizes on this, questioning how someone that weak could even be considered. But realizing the president's reluctance to change her mind, Pablo makes a bold offer. He challenges Abel to a duel to prove his worth as one of the strongest students in Class A. But Abel instantly refuses, insisting he has no intention of joining the council, but everyone else, Judith included, seems eager to see it happen. Still, Abel protests, saying he won't join their stupid council, so he has no reason to fight anybody. Seeing his hesitation, Pablo formally challenges Abel to a duel, and Judith immediately accepts the challenge as witness. With that, she announces the duel to the entire room and asks if both parties agree. Pablo declares his agreement on the spot, while Abel keeps insisting he's not trying to fight any mofo. But Judith clarifies that, by Academy rules, once a duel is officially announced, refusal is impossible. With the duel now decided, Pablo grins, ready for no holding back, while Abel, trapped, realizes he has no choice but to give it everything he's got. Since Pablo is a Class A student, Judith gives him the right to decide the stakes of the duel. With that, Pablo declares that if Abel wins, he moves up to Class A while he will drop to Class D. He also throws in that if he wins, he's getting a VIP pass into the student council, and Judith gladly accepts. Judith then asks if Abel's cool with the deal, but Abel, he's not exactly hyped. Winning just to get bumped to Class A feels like a weak reward. When he protests, Judith explains the benefits. She says every student strives to be in Class A, and getting the rare chance to move from Class D to A is an exceptional offer. Finally, Abel agrees, and the duel officially begins in the Academy courtyard with students buzzing with anticipation. As Judith announces the start, Abel's thoughts are elsewhere. Even though every other student aims for the highly coveted Class A, his real aim is to avoid clout, so he decides to lose quietly and dodge the student council altogether. To do that, he plans to hold back his special magic and keep things low-key. Feeling confident, Pablo smugly invites Abel to attack from anywhere, so Abel starts with a simple ice spear. Pablo laughs at the basic spell and counters with Erase, a high-level magic-canceling spell, only to be shocked when Abel's spear pierces straight through his gut, unhindered. This works because Erase cancels targeted magic, but Abel's magic is rooted in science, so it's fundamentally different and immune to Erase. Meanwhile, Pablo, hurt and confused about why his spell doesn't work, clutches his gut while Abel taunts him for losing his fighting spirit so easily as a Class A student. For his second attack, Abel launches another ice spear and Pablo tries Erase again but gets hit once more. Abel realizes if the dude keeps taking hits like a target on a wall, his plan to lose might actually fail. So he continues his psychological torture on Pablo, calling him a weakling and mocking him for relying only on Erase. This infuriates Pablo, who pulls himself together and unleashes his ultimate spell, summoning a massive, sinister sword wreathed in dark energy. Without holding back, Pablo charges and swings with deadly force, but Abel instantly throws up an ice wall, hoping to deflect. However, Pablo's blade cleaves through it like paper, scaring Abel out of his mind. As the blade closes in, Abel wonders if he should use his Thunderstrike attack. But then something clicks, and he remembers his initial intention isn't even to win the fight. In the blink of an eye, the battle ends with Abel lying unconscious on the ground while Pablo stands, sword in hand. The vice president immediately announces Pablo as the winner of the duel and instructs officials to use healing magic on the contestants before taking Abel to the infirmary. After that, the pineapple-headed VP proudly turns to the president, saying the match is just as expected. Then he approaches her, laughing, and brags about how Pablo completely outclasses Abel in the duel, even though his erase spell fails. Pablo then walks over to the president and asks if she will now allow him to join the student council, while Galb continues to savor the moment. Judith, however, remains silent, lost in thought. When Galb continues to press her to say something, Judith eventually excuses herself, says she's tired, and leaves matters for him to sort out. Alone, Judith reflects on the unusual outcome of the match. She recalls being little and how her teacher used to praise her sharp observational skills. Because of her keen eyes, she had noticed that during the fight, Pablo's erase spell didn't fail as everyone, though, but instead activated properly. She also noticed that Abel's ice spear, although it looked normal, isn't the same as one made from magic. Replaying the entrance exam in her head, Judith, trying to piece things together, also recalled that the magic circle Abel had used was unlike anything she had seen. It was simple, ancient, and completely unanalyzable. Pondering deeply, Judith concludes that Abel's magic isn't basic at all but intentionally hidden, and vows to uncover the truth, learn more, and ultimately obtain it. Meanwhile, our boy wakes in the infirmary, thinking about the library and whether it's open. Reflecting on the duel, he admits his loss is decisive and is relieved there's no way anyone will make him join the student council now. However, he notes his weakness in close combat, just like how his sister had defeated him at close range, and wonders if he could have even blocked Pablo's final blow. Walking out of the infirmary, Abel shrugs off the idea of improving for battle. More importantly, he needs to focus on advancing his research. Sometime later, our boy enters the vast library and is immediately soothed by the sight, happy to be back in his element. Abel then wanders deeper into the grand stacks, eyes wide with excitement at the countless magical books he's never seen before. He's so excited he wishes he could just sleep and wake up here without any disturbance. However, he realizes he mustn't lose sight of his purpose. He had been studying magnetism, yet his experiments had hit a dead end. The principles of science claim magnetism comes from spiraling particles emitted from a magnet, but when he tries to replicate it with magic, nothing happens. Just then, he quickly finds a book titled Overview of Spirit Magic, and after reading for hours back in his dorm, he finally drops the book, marks it as ongoing research, and drifts off to sleep. The following morning, Abel runs into Myria, who cheerfully greets him. She announces they're on the same team for the upcoming battle event, which immediately jogs Abel's memory. Abel, less enthusiastic, still can't understand why. Since he came to the academy, it's been one battle after another. Myria, all excited, tells him they still have two others in their group, whom she'll introduce later, and then insists they strategize together. However, Abel, seeing how motivated she is, asks if she's aiming to be in Class A2, but he's shocked to learn that failure in the upcoming battle means outright expulsion. Myria explains that if the higher classes fail, it's just a demotion, but for Class D, the lowest class, failure means there's no class to be demoted to. This revelation leaves Abel frozen as he realizes the high stakes involved. Panicking, Abel realizes he should have taken yesterday's duel more seriously. When he asks if he will be expelled if he loses, Myria clarifies it's not instant expulsion. 3 losses are allowed, but that's not much comfort. Just then, a tall, lanky dude with a deadpan stare approaches, and Myria introduces him to Abel as Victor, one of their teammates. Abel tries to be friendly, but Victor just clicks his tongue and walks off. Next comes Sienna, the final teammate whom Myria also introduces to Abel, but the girl doesn't say a single word and remains distant. With the 2 maniacs he's just met, Abel wonders if this team will survive the tournament. Just then, class begins, with Selene teaching about magic power and how they come from a mage's own soul, and stressing that each mage must research their own path. Abel really enjoys the topic and is deeply immersed in the lesson. When class ends, Myria approaches Abel and invites him to lunch. When Abel reminds her of the strategy meeting they're supposed to have with their other teammates, Maria informs him that Victor declines to be a part, while Sienna deserves a home in the afterlife for sleeping like a drunk sloth. They find Sienna sleeping on her desk and try to wake her, but she's far gone in slumberland. Several minutes later, Abel and Maria head to the cafeteria. Over lunch, Abel chats with Maria about how the academy is quite different from what he expects, and is always focused on battles and training. He adds that he understands the training part because it's all preparation for the great calamity, the sudden arrival of false gods that destroy everything in their path. While talking, Abel recalls the false god So, who cursed his sister. Maria cuts him short, calling him different. She explains that magic schools are like that, and the stronger the magician, the better the school's reputation. To her, magic is the ultimate weapon meant for fighting, but Abel disagrees. He tells her that magic's purpose depends on how it's applied, and he prefers research over combat. Maria, flustered, calls him a strange person, but smiles and then says they need to discuss the team battle strategy. Following that, Maria asks Abel what kind of magic he is good at. Abel tries to dodge the question, but then casually lies that he is good at ice magic. When Abel asks Maria the same question, Maria reveals that she is a demon tamer. Abel perks up instantly, asking what kind of demons she tames. So Maria invites him to her room after class, saying it's easier to show than explain, making Abel overly excited. After class that day, they head to Maria's room, and as they reach the door, Maria opens it, inviting Abel to go in. However, she admits she's a bit nervous letting a guy into her room. The moment they walk inside, Maria immediately begins a demon summoning ritual. Magic swirls around them as she summons her demon, Furu. Suddenly, a small, pink, blob-like creature appears, cute enough to make Abel question if it's really a demon. Curious, Abel moves to touch it, but the moment he does, lightning zaps through him and sends him crashing to the floor. Maria immediately rushes to check if he is still alive and then explains that anyone other than her who touches it gets shocked. Abel insists it's fine, but she tries healing him anyway. The magic works, though she admits she's not great with healing spells. Abel brushes it off, saying if he is left alone for a while, he will eventually heal, but Maria bolts out to get a healing potion. While she's gone, Abel notices her demon went with her, and as he looks around the room, he spots some papers on the desk. Picking them up, he realizes they are research materials, but encrypted with codes. Unable to resist, he starts analyzing the cipher, noting that decoding it just means figuring out the rule. After analyzing, he examines the pages and recognizes them as encrypted magic circles. Normally, a magic circle includes a standard description of the god who created the world, and that information serves as a clue to the pattern. But in these papers, that section is missing entirely. Flipping through more diagrams, he realizes it's the same for all of them, which he finds abnormal. Before he can dig deeper, Maria suddenly appears behind him like a ghost in the night, asking what he's doing. Caught off guard, Abel awkwardly claims he just picked the papers up without thinking. But Maria's eyes sharpen as she asks if he read what's inside. Abel denies it, saying he only glanced and then realized it's written in code. However, Maria's suspicion only deepens, and she accuses him of being a heretic as she unleashes a spell known as Domain Chaos. Suddenly, dark, swirling energy engulfs the room, and Abel finds himself floating in a pitch-black void, with everything, including Maria, appearing upside down. She calmly acknowledges that he, too, is different just like her, and demands to know the name of his god. Before Abel can respond, Maria reveals her true identity, declaring her name as Anthropos and revealing that she is a false god. Abel is shocked out of his mind to hear this. As he recalls their earlier encounters and how cheerful Maria has always been, he can't believe she's a false god on par with the evil being who cursed his sister. Maria then asks for his divine name since she started by introducing herself, and Abel is surprised. She thinks he is a heretic. He tells her his normal name, which she already knows, but Maria refuses to accept it, asking him not to play dumb and insisting he tell her his divine name. Internally, Abel debates whether to bluff, but he quickly decides that half-baked lies could be fatal against someone like her. So he stands his ground, says he isn't lying, and declares he has no ties to any false gods. Frustrated, Myria narrows her eyes and then suddenly attacks, slicing off Abel's arm in an instant. Abel screams in pain, collapsing to the ground while clutching his severed arm. Myria, surprised, questions if he's truly human, noting that someone with a false god's power should have resisted. Abel struggles to his feet as he insists again that he's only human. Now convinced, Myria heals his arm brand new like it never happened, surprising Abel, who is baffled that her magic comes without warning, with no chance or signs of activation. After that, Myria leans closer and presses Abel about who he really is. Abel calls himself ordinary, but she rejects his answer and then points out that humans with zero magic power can't normally use magic at all. But Abel continues to ride with the lie that his zero magic is the fault of the mana measurement device. Realizing Abel is bent on not revealing anything, Myria suddenly corners him by magically inserting her finger into his forehead to read his thoughts. She says she knows he has no magic power, and whatever he's using isn't normal. Without a false god's power, what he's done should be impossible. Abel realizes she's seeing right through his facade. So he tries to explain, claiming his magic is built on a different framework, not borrowed from any false god. But Myria isn't convinced, so she yells at him to stop spouting nonsense. Suddenly, a dark, evil voice from inside Myria mutters the word science. Abel's eyes immediately widen. He panics, wondering how the heck she is able to figure out that term, and instantly realizes this isn't Myria speaking anymore. The strange voice speaking inside Myria calls Abel human, saying it finds it fascinating that he has brought science into this world. It adds that it finds Abel quite useful and will want him to serve it. Suddenly, the ominous dark presence fades and Myria stands before Abel again, arms crossed. With Abel sprawled on the floor, trying to catch his breath, Myria moves closer and relays the entity's message, saying that if Abel becomes its subordinate, his life will be spared. Abel's mind races as he asks her if she is still the false god Anthropos. Myria replies that, at this moment, she is herself, but then admits she's just a vessel for the false god. Abel has never heard of such a thing, but the thought is unsettling. Curious, Abel asks Myria how she knew about his magic, and Myria reveals she had seen it for the first time at the entrance exam. She adds that at the exam she noticed his unusual lightning magic, and since then she had been keeping an eye on him, worried he might be a heretic. Hearing this, Abel realized that every time she had helped him in the past, she was also investigating him. When Abel asks about the role he is supposed to play as her subordinate, Myria finally states her terms. He will obey her orders when given and never speak of her to anyone, or she'll unalive both him and whoever he tells. Thinking to himself, Abel figures even if he wants to tell anyone. Realistically, no one will believe he encountered a false god possessing a human. Abel then asks why a false god would even bother attending school, and Myria says it's obvious, revealing that the reason is to save all the students of the academy. Abel is stunned, knowing that in a false god's eyes, salvation means slaughtering everyone. Instead of panicking, Abel sees an opportunity. If this false god is connected to the one who cursed his sister, maybe he can find a clue to break it. But before he can push further, he notices Myria's research material he's been holding and asks what kind of research she is actually working on. The tension between them eases just slightly as Abel claims it's just pure curiosity. Myria exhales, clearly conflicted, then surprises him by agreeing to hand it over if it bothers him that much. But she warns there will be no takebacks. Abel's nerdy attitude kicks in immediately as he gets excited hearing this. He lifts the research material like a trophy, only for his joy to be cut short when Myria casually mentions he'll have to decode it himself. Later, with Abel gone, Myria sits alone in her room, thinking. But just then, the strange voice of the false god, rising from the dark, dense air, starts talking to her about Abel and how interesting he is. Myria questions whether releasing him is wise, and the false god admits that clapping him is still an option, but now isn't the right time. For now, she considers him a fascinating find worth keeping. When Myria inquires about this science Abel is all about, the false god explains it's an ancient discipline, a forgotten human legacy, one she knows little about herself. The false god also notes that Abel has been burying himself in ancient texts, emphasizing why they need to keep him around. since even a false god doesn't know everything. Abel spends the entire night wrestling with the cipher, only to end up with nothing but frustration. His desk is a chaotic mess of papers and notes, yet he doesn't even have the faintest idea where to start. Morning arrives, and as he slowly walks to class, his mind keeps circling the same thought: how to work his way around the problem. Suddenly, Myria shows up with a cheerful "good morning," catching him off guard. She brings up the upcoming team battle, acting unusually normal, which only makes Abel suspicious. She admits she's worried about their uncooperative teammates, Victor and Sienna, and how it will affect the battle since everyone on the team has low mana to begin with. When Abel jokingly suggests that, as a false god, she could easily handle the problem on her own, Myria laughs awkwardly, and then denies having any idea what he's talking about. Glancing at Victor sitting at the far end of the class, Abel thinks about the best way to convince a stubborn person to cooperate, and then he gets an idea. When Abel confronts the arrogant punk about pulling his weight for the team, the dude refuses, saying he doesn't want to be on the same team with a pathetic, zero-magic waste of space like him. Without hesitation, Abel switches tactics. If words fail, then force will do. He launches an ice spear directly at Victor's pissing stick and barely misses. Tension erupts instantly, with Myria shouting at Abel, demanding to know if he has lost his last remaining brain cell. Meanwhile, Victor, pissed, calls Abel a worthless zero-magic dropout and furiously swears to take revenge. But Abel, unmoved by his useless threats, invites him to settle it outside. Victor, overconfident, agrees instantly, and as the duo moves outside the school, Myria tries to calm things down, reminding Abel that they still need Victor for the team battle. But Abel points out that just yesterday she herself tried to end him, so she's hardly in a position to act innocent. Myria gets emotional hearing this and tries to explain that it was different, but then she regains her composure and advises him not to wreck the school too badly. The conversation then drifts back to the cipher. Abel admits he's still stuck, and Myria reveals she never expected him to crack it anyway. Outside, Victor bluntly spells it out that he won't fight alongside rejects like them, claiming they'd only slow him down. Abel, confused by his words, then asks Myria if Victor is actually any good. But Myria reveals that the delusional loudmouth also has low magic power like them, which makes him a reject too. The standoff quickly turns into a real fight as Abel attacks with another ice spear while Victor blocks with an earth wall. Abel then chooses to provoke Victor further by challenging him. If Victor fails to block his next attack, he must join the team without complaint. Victor, cocky, calls Abel a moron and immediately agrees, confident he can block Abel's basic magic attacks. But to his utter shock, Abel unveils multiple simultaneous incantations, an advanced feat that leaves him stunned. Before Victor can summon his earth wall, Abel's follow-up ice spear shatters through his defenses, piercing him and leaving him sprawled unconscious on the ground. With the duel concluded, Myria calls Abel out for going overboard, and Abel agrees, wondering if maybe he overdid it. They then decide to carry Victor to the infirmary, but Abel nearly dies hauling him. Victor's weight is like 3 times his, making him wish he could use gravity manipulation, though he chooses not to avoid suspicion. Upon reaching the infirmary, the talk shifts to Sienna, the other stubborn teammate. But Myria immediately forbids Abel from using the same aggressive tactics, threatening to hold it against him forever if he does. Abel teases her, but then agrees. Myria then insists she'll handle Sienna in her own way, and Abel steps back, quietly noting how different Myria seems from yesterday. Later, Abel's thoughts drift to the bigger picture. He reflects on the false god Anthropos, its methods, its choice to target the Magic Academy. Instead of chaotic destruction, this approach feels calculated, almost strategic, aimed at the country's brightest young mages. Abel believes Anthropos possesses the power to wipe out every student in the school if the god wants to. But then again, the hesitation makes him wonder if there's some kind of game at play. Will Abel uncover the plan of this evil false god? Comment Science Mage if you're hyped to see what happens next in Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, drop a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. Thanks for watching, as always.